Playing guitar is really simple. All you do is put this finger here and this finger here, and that's it. Okay, there's a little more to it than that. In this video, I'm going to start at the beginning and show you the basics of how to play guitar. I'm going to assume that you were born yesterday and your squishy little baby hands have just touched a guitar for the first time. We're going to cover the parts of the guitar, the basics of technique. I'm going to trick you into learning some music theory, and then we're going to play your first chord with absolutely impeccable technique. This video is for the absolute beginner or the returning beginner who wants to slow down and do this right. This video is going to cover the basics of contemporary guitar. So if you want to learn classical, this might not be of much help. But if you want to learn rock, blues, jazz, metal, or any contemporary kind of music, this is going to cover the essentials and cut out the fluff. Thank you for watching, and let's get started. First up are the parts of the guitar. Now, as you might have guessed, these are called the strings. The most important thing you're going to learn in this whole video are the names of the strings. They are E, A, D, G, B, E. The phrase that everybody uses to remember the names of the strings is Eddie ate dynamite, goodbye Eddie. This horrific acronym tells the tale of a deranged guy named Eddie who paid the ultimate price so we can remember the names of the guitar strings. Don't let Eddie's sacrifice be in vain. Remember the names of the guitar strings. E, A, D, G, B, E. The strings are connected to the guitar with these, which are called tuners. The way that tuners work are they wrap the strings around a post to tighten it, and they let a little string out to loosen it. If you think about a rubber band, the tighter you pull it, the higher the pitch gets. And the looser it gets, the lower the pitch gets. It's the same principle for guitar strings. The strings run over the nut and along the fretboard, which is sometimes called the fingerboard, which is a slab of wood attached to the neck that you press down on with your left hand while you're playing. The fretboard houses these strips of wire, which are called frets. And these things are called inlays, and they can look pretty different on different guitars. Inlays just serve as visual markers so you can quickly tell where you are on the guitar neck when you're playing. Inlays always occur at the 3rd fret, the 5th fret, the 7th fret, the 9th fret, and the 12th fret. And then they repeat, but we'll get to that later. There are also usually fret markers that are on the side of the neck that face you while you're playing. These visual markers are just easier to see when you're looking down at the guitar. Which reminds me, this whole thing is called the neck. The other major part of the guitar is called the body. The body houses the bridge, which ends the resonant length of the strings, which was started at the nut, if you remember, and it couples the strings to the body. This part is creatively named the sound hole because it's where the sound comes out and it is a hole. This is called a cutaway or a cutout, and the purpose of the cutaway is so you can play higher up on the guitar neck without the body of the guitar getting in the way too much. Some guitars, like this one, don't have a cutaway. This thing is called a pick guard, and it's usually a thin piece of plastic that protects the body of the guitar from getting scratched up and nicked by the pick. An interesting fact is that in 2004, the sound hole and the pick guard were both named by Dr. Pickguardathy Soundul, who was well known for his achievements naming things like the pick guard, sound hole, fireplace, orange, car seat, and many more. Okay, so real quick, to explain some of the differences between an electric guitar and an acoustic guitar, I want to talk about the differences and how they work, which is honestly pretty cool. So with an acoustic guitar, when the string is picked, it vibrates, right? And that vibration gets sent through the bridge into the top of the guitar. Think of the top of the acoustic guitar kind of like a drum head or maybe a speaker cone. It vibrates and moves the air inside of the guitar, inside the sound cavity. All sound is just moving air. It's just air vibrating at a certain frequency. So the top of the guitar vibrates the air at a certain frequency, and that sound gets amplified basically by bouncing around inside the guitar. And then that sound comes out the sound hole towards the audience. So if you think about it, for this to work really well, the top of the guitar has to be really rigid so that it vibrates. And this is actually the reason why on really high-end acoustic guitars, you'll see that the tops are made of solid wood, usually Sitka spruce. Because the wood is really solid and really rigid, the top of the guitar can vibrate more freely. Think of this as opposed to a softer, more inert material, like maybe on lower-end guitars you might find laminate, for example. This is also the reason that different woods make guitars sound different. They have different densities and levels of rigidity, which affects how much the guitar vibrates and what it sounds like. Now, on an electric guitar, it's completely different. Instead of having an acoustic cavity and a sound hole, they have these, which are called pickups. Pickups are basically electromagnets. They're pieces of metal that have wire, usually copper wire, wrapped around them. The pickups generate a magnetic field, and when a metal string vibrates and disturbs that magnetic field, that gets sent as an electrical signal from the guitar to an amplifier, and the amplifier turns that into audible sound. This is done either with a computer or glass radio tubes from the 1940s and 50s, and surprisingly, the tubes generally sound better. Now, while we're talking about the differences between acoustic guitars and electric guitars, I want to talk about something that gets asked all the time. That is, are acoustic and electric guitar the same? And the answer is yes. For the purposes of playing, they're exactly the same. If you can play one, you can play the other. It's the same skill. To practice one is basically to practice the other. So if you only have an acoustic and you want to play electric at some point, you'll be fine, and vice versa. Okay, now let's cover how to actually play. The goal here is to learn how to play an E minor chord with absolutely perfect technique. We're not going to rush through this so you can bang out that first chord. We're going to start at the beginning and do this the right way. First of all, sit up straight and rest the guitar on your leg. To hold the pick, make a hook with your right index finger and rest the pick on your knuckle. Then just clamp down with your thumb. As you progress, you might want to angle the pick back a little bit more and choke up on it so there isn't as much pick showing. But don't worry about that for now. Okay, starting with the right hand, when you strum, you want to think about painting the strings. Notice how I'm angling the pick down here so that it slides really cleanly across the strings. And when I go up, I angle the pick back so that again, it slides really cleanly across the strings. What you don't want to do is angle the pick downward and have it get stuck and hung up in the strings. Imagine you have a paintbrush and you're just gliding across the strings. It's important to remember that when you're first beginning, you want to practice doing down strums and up strums. The tendency for a lot of beginners is to only do down strums, but that's a pretty bad habit to get into. When you first start strumming, just use open strings. Don't focus on making anything sound overly pleasant. Right now, you're just trying to get the feel for strumming. Okay, so the flip side of strumming is picking a single note. To pick a single note, don't overcomplicate it. Just hold the pick like you did before, approach a string, I'm on the low E string here, and just press cleanly through the string. Same thing for an upstroke. That's it. Keep picking simple for now. Picking should be easy and without a lot of tension. What picking shouldn't be is a really tiny strum. Picking and strumming are really two different movements. With picking, the movement is all in the wrist. Whereas with strumming, it is true that the wrist remains loose, but the primary movement comes from the elbow. No picking or strumming should involve your fingers manipulating the pick to any huge degree. It should be from your wrist. The Jedi teach us that talent without training is nothing, but what those posers should teach us is that right hand technique without left hand technique is even less than nothing. Let's talk about how to fret. Okay, so first of all, let's cover a couple of reference things. When we're referring to frets, We count them sequentially, starting at the headstock, going towards the body. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. Another thing that's just useful to know that doesn't really fit anywhere else in this video is that generally when people talk about going higher, it's a little unintuitive at first. To go higher on the guitar is to go that way, towards the floor. So here, up on the low E string here, this is lower, and this high E string is higher. When people talk about low and high on the guitar, they don't literally mean altitude, they're talking about pitch. So down here, again on the low E string, is lower in pitch, and up here on the high E string is higher in pitch. In that same vein of thinking, lower on the neck is more towards the headstock, and higher is more towards the body. Anyway, back to how to fret. So let's say you're trying to fret the 5th fret of the low E string. This note's called A. What you don't want to do is take your first finger and press down directly on the 5th fret. It'll end up sounding something like this. Sort of dead and dull. So if the 5th fret is right here, I want to push down a little bit behind it. Now, this isn't such a big deal, but you don't want to be so close to the 4th fret either. You can get some of that buzzing going on. The general rule is that you want to be as close as you can be behind the 5th fret without actually being on the fret. That gets the cleanest result. Now, as you go higher on the fretboard, the frets aren't wide enough apart for this to make a difference, but down here in the low part of the fretboard, it does make a difference. Another tip is to make sure that when you're fretting, your thumb is directly behind your fingers. The tendency for a lot of beginners is to flare the thumb out towards the back, kind of towards the headstock. Try to avoid this. Try to keep your thumb exactly right across the neck from the fingers. All right, we're almost to the point where we can play our first chord. But what is a chord? A chord is a collection of notes that sound good together. A note is just a single sound frequency. But if there are an infinite number of frequencies, does that mean there are an infinite number of notes? No, there are only 12. Here they are, but it's not important to learn them right now. What is important right now is the fact that notes hang out together in groups called scales. Scales and chords come together to form keys. Generally, songs are in a certain key, and so all the notes and chords playing in that song are a part of a certain key. When this works, you don't notice it. You're just enjoying the song. But when a note is out of key, you really notice it. So it's important to play in key. Anyway, those were the basics of music theory, which most guitarists avoid like the plague, so you're already ahead. Oh, and the way to play E minor is like this. You're going to take your second finger, which is your middle finger on your left hand, and you're going to fret the 2nd fret of the A string. Then you're going to take your 3rd finger, which is your ring finger, and put it on the 2nd fret of the D string. And then you're just going to strum all 6 strings. Very cool sounding chord. It's important to remember to not compromise technique here. Think about fretting properly, think about strumming properly, think about the proper way to hold the guitar and the pick. Don't sacrifice technique here. It'll only hurt you in the long run. Okay, so now you've played your first chord with impeccable technique. Try strumming that, just play around with it. Try to get comfortable with a guitar in your hands. So what's next? So if I were trying to learn guitar from zero and I was trying to progress as quickly as possible, I would do 3 things. The first thing would be to find a program and stick with it. Now, to be honest, I would hope that you keep watching my videos and stick with my program because I'm pretty. But seriously, it is way more important to just pick a decent program, start and stick with it, than it is to scroll endlessly trying to find the perfect program that contains some untold secret of ancient guitar wizards that'll instantly transform you into a master. It doesn't exist, and neither does the perfect program or the perfect guitar lesson video. Except for mine, of course. There are no secrets about how to play guitar. I dare you to find one. Look up any guitar topic at all, and I bet you there's going to be something there to point you in the right direction. There's only one thing that will actually make you a better guitar player, and that's practice. Speaking of practice, the second thing I would try to do to progress quickly is practice daily. My own personal experience, as well as a ton of research, shows us that the fastest way to learn something is to practice it daily, because so much of the effective learning process actually comes from frequently revisiting whatever it is we're trying to learn. This is even more important than overall practice volume. Instead of practicing 7 hours 1 day a week, you would get more benefit out of practicing 1 hour 7 days a week. But with guitar, it doesn't even take an hour a day. I seriously believe that you could make noticeable progress with as little as 5 minutes a day. But if it were me, I would probably try to practice about 20 minutes a day. If you practice 20 minutes a day, I would expect to progress pretty quickly, and I wouldn't expect the stuff in this video to take any more than a couple of days to learn. Finally, if you do choose to stick with my program, master all of the stuff in this video before you move on to the next level. Do not worry about the next level until you know everything in this video in your sleep. But when you are ready to move on, the next video will be here, and in the meantime, you might need to tune your guitar. Thank you for watching.